How many patients did you do this to, Mr. Bramhall?
Described as one of the best liver surgeons of his generation, today Simon Bramhall left court with a career forever scarred. In 2013, he burned his initials into 2 of his patients' liver transplants during surgery at the QE hospital in Birmingham. He's said to have told a nurse who queried the action, "I do this." And although it caused no lasting physical harm, the marking was branded in court as a criminal abuse of power.
It had nothing to do with the procedure that he was undertaking at the time. It was done without the knowledge or consent of the patients. And there's a particular public interest here because obviously it's important for patient confidence that they can continue to have confidence in their surgeons when they're in such a vulnerable position.
Bramhall used an argon beam coagulator like this during liver operations. Its proper use is to seal bleeding blood vessels using a jet of gas and electric current. His misuse saw him sear his initials SB onto the livers of his 2 patients. It was only when one of those livers needed to be removed by another surgeon because of patient rejection, the initials were seen, a photograph was taken, and an investigation began. He resigned from the QE hospital in 2014 after a career of 30 years and carrying out more than 350 transplants. As to why Simon Bramhall burned his initials into the livers of 2 of his patients during surgery, the court heard how during police interview he'd confessed that it was a naive and foolhardy attempt to relieve the stress and tension felt in the operating theatre, but admitted that it was an arrogant act that he could not defend. During the hearing, an impact statement read on behalf of one of the patients involved said they'd suffered long-term psychological effects, describing it as abuse which left them violated. But also in court were former patients and colleagues who had nothing but praise for a man described as a master surgeon and a credit to the NHS.
Mr. Bramhall saved my life, and it struck me before going into court, the group of people there in support of him, none of us would have been there if not for Simon Bramhall.
We all do things, we all say things in the heat of a moment which we wish maybe in hindsight we hadn't said.
On passing sentence, the judge said that Mr. Bramhall's behaviour showed such arrogance that it strayed into criminal behaviour, and by burning his initials into his patients' livers while they were unconscious and without their consent was an abuse of power which affects the bonds of trust between a doctor and their patient. And although it was acknowledged Mr. Bramhall has saved many lives over many years, today he was convicted. After admitting 2 counts of assault by beating, he was fined £10,000 and given a 12-month community order with 120 hours of unpaid work. The judge describing a career left in shatters through conduct born of professional arrogance. Chris Halpin, ITV News, Birmingham.
And tonight, in a statement, the University Hospital's Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust said the Trust is clear that Mr. Bramhall made a mistake in the context of a complex clinical situation, and this has been dealt with via the appropriate authorities, including the Trust as his then employer. However, we can reassure his patients that there was no impact whatsoever on the quality of his clinical outcomes.